Welcome to the first episode of the One More K podcast. Hey, Ned, how are you doing?
Marcus, honestly,
yes, let's do this.
You know, I was once told the hardest step is the first step. And once you do that, every step you take sends you in a certain direction. So we're going to find out which direction we're going.
Very true. I was thinking about how we got around to all of this, to this new project of us. And I went back to our trail runs in Singapore. Both of us are passionate trail runners. You are becoming a legend in Singapore, Ned. And we have circled around the McRitchie Reservoir so many times. It's been great. Despite your age, you always have been a bit faster than me.
That's not true.
I've been always trying to catch up.
You're a bit faster. Maybe I'm a bit farther. Faster and farther, not farther, but further. Further is the right one.
That's true. You're further. But we've been talking about so much trail stuff the last 6-7 years, and sometimes business talk, but mostly trail. So we felt strongly about why don't we just record all our conversations in a podcast? And now that the new year has started, there's new adventures happening for all of us. And it's time to put all this knowledge you have, especially, into the wide open and start this so-called podcast endurance run. And we are excited to get it going.
Always people tell you there's too many podcasts, right? It's like, there's so many podcasts. But for us, obviously, we always enjoy talking. You have your great business. I'm passionate about ultra running. There isn't much talk from ultra from within Asia. Obviously, we're going to talk about global. But as you say, because I'm older, I actually started, my first ultra run was when I was 14. I did a 24-hour run in the Scottish Hills. But I've really been passionate about ultra for 30 years. And I promise you, there's never been more excitement about trail and ultra than today. I mean, this just absolutely feels like, it feels almost like the start of ultra. That's not true, but it feels like we're at the second wave, third wave, whatever it is. So felt the right time to do this podcast.
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit younger, so for me it's the first wave, but I'm sure for you maybe it's second or third wave. Because you're based in Singapore, you've been based in Southeast Asia for 25 years?
32 years now.
Holy moly. So I just counting 10. I mean, I'm based in Vietnam right now, and I've been exposed to Southeast Asian trail running quite a bit the last few, like almost half a decade. I can say this now, half a decade. And you've been around the block a bit much longer, which is great. I think that gives us good perspectives to this. And that's also, I think, because we are based in this region, what we're doing has a bit more of an Asian spin to it. We do want to cover global endurance trail running. But of course, just because by the nature of where we are based, we're going to probably have a bit more of an Asian spin, which you say, I think, is exciting.
Yeah. And why don't we do this? Like, I know you know me. But our listeners, I think we've told them we're going to talk about trail, ultra. We'll probably get into some other endurance stuff, but it's trail and ultra. But why don't we tell them who we are so at least they know? Some people might see us on video, but if you're listening, who is us? Marcus, why don't you go first, man?
Well, you might have guessed by now, I have a German accent, so I happen to be a German engineer. But most of my life, I've been building businesses, first in tech. So I've been doing some tech stuff in London and had great time there with clean tech and some children tech. And then moved to Singapore, where I met you, Ned. And we both spent a bit of time in fintech. And I was more on the investment side. So I spent time running early stage investment funds into fintech. Very different to what we're doing right now, but exciting enough to get to know the region of Singapore, Vietnam, Thailand, and so on. And then the last 4 years, or actually 4 years ago, I decided to spend more time in Vietnam, given that I wanted to prepare myself for the 100K races I was doing and multi-day and multi-stage races. So I packed my bags, left the island of Singapore and moved to the highlands of Vietnam to get to know what's going on here and have better climate as well, to be honest, a bit more European climate here in Vietnam in certain parts. Yeah, and then from a long training runs, I started a company that is focused on nutrition for endurance sports, which is called Lecker. And yeah, so I've been based here and I've been really enjoying to build up the company in the last few years now.
That is a good summary, but is this true? You are the only German ultra runner running a nutrition brand in Vietnam.
in Asia.
What?
Yeah. For now.
I remember when we met, and you were fintech investment. I was running a fintech startup, both of which are very hard. Ultra running's hard. Investing in startups is hard. Running a startup is hard. But you told me you were going to go to Vietnam and had this kind of idea of a nutrition energy brand. I was like, all right, this dude's crazy, but you know what? I'm going to cheer him on because it would be cool.
So you've been a great supporter. And it was almost natural to kind of do something together. And now we're even doing more together. It's amazing. But yeah, what's your story, Ned?
Yeah, well, look, I'm 56, so getting on a bit, half century. But, I'm not a big fan of getting worried about age. So grew up in Scotland, self-sufficient mainly. So we lived in a little house in the countryside, caught our own food. And the basis of my endurance is that I walk 2 miles to school a day and 2 miles home, so 4 miles a day from the age of 4, which I didn't think anything of. It just felt normal, but I think that was good base. And moved to Asia 32 years ago and have been in sales ever since, selling mainly financial stuff, online trading, equities. And then after a really good long career at the age of 48, I saw all these kids doing fintech. I'm like, how hard can that be? And they found out it was really, really, really hard, really hard. But, what doesn't kill you, or, all of that. It was an ultra and a half. Didn't quite make it to the end, but we got close, man. But throughout all of that, I think maybe from growing up in the countryside of Scotland, walking to school, catching food, I did a 24-hour ultra race when I was 14 in the Scottish Hills. And I just did it because some friends asked. And, when friends ask you to do things when you're a kid, you want to join in. And I just thought, oh, this is cool. And I didn't do much more of that until I was 28 in Hong Kong. And for you listeners who are in Asia, you will know that Hong Kong holds probably, I'm going to say, one of Asia's most iconic endurance ultra trail races called the Mackerel House or the Trail Walker, which is 100K, unusually teams of 4. So quite an unusual format. I joined that and it was amazing. And that started the love of ultra endurance. I spent a long time running. Tried to break 3 hours in the marathon, got a 3:02, which brought some tears to my eyes. Didn't quite get there. Spent like 6 years in Ironman with a dream of going to Kona. Qualified and went to Kona, which was, it was great, but, to be honest, a bit more bragging than anything else. And it was just another race. And certainly since the age of 50, I've always loved ultra and trail and always done some longer stuff. Really got back into it in the last few years. Super passionate. Running more and more, and got into backyard. And I love it all. I read every history book on ultra. I'm sure in this pod, we're going to talk about the pedestrianism of the 1880s through to Janos Kouros, the great, who settled to today, and to the iconic moment when Courtney was mobbed at the UTMB like it was the Tour de France. So that's me, passionate, love it, love talking, love running. And yeah, I've just came back from a little run in the jungle, and I feel super fortunate that in Singapore, even though it's a tiny island, we have some amazing trails. So always good to get out.
You just, I think, also humble there because you are super into backyard. And last year you came, what was it, in the backyard position of the backyard?
Third in Singapore.
Third in Singapore. You are very hooked on the whole backyard.
We will.
Train.
I truly hope we will be covering backyard. I know it's not for everybody. I get that, but I think we can all appreciate what Harvey Lewis did at 107 hours. Yeah. Just mind-numbing. I'm sure we're going to talk about Lazarus Lake. I'm going to ask Laz to be on the show. I'm going to tell you, listeners, keep listening, because one day we're getting Laz, the great man, to talk about life and running.
This is, we have a lot to cover. A lot of potential also for this podcast, and we are taking it step by step, just like an endurance race. These are the first 3 steps of a 100-miler, and as you might know, it's gonna, you have to feel the rhythm, get with the rhythm, and the first checkpoint is coming at some point. But let's see how that goes. But like any other trail run, let's plan out a bit and let's predict a bit what's going to happen this year. I'm so curious to hear from you what you think is going to happen this year in the world of trail running. And we have, of course, some data from last year, and we have a lot of big events. You already mentioned UTMB, where there's also some drama happening. We will cover it later. But let's dig into the athletes first. Like, who do you think this year on the female side is going to rule and be the queen of trail running, whether it's globally or in Asia? I'm very curious to hear your thoughts.
And so I'm not going to go for one. I do have some individuals. And I don't know if this will be a popular view, but I'm always a believer in you say your view. Money is changing our sport. We used to race for belt buckles. So for anybody who knows of the Western states, you get a belt buckle. Hard rock, there's no money. And it's great. Look, this is the reality of sport, right? It gets popular. We cannot deny now that trail running, while still a niche, is no longer the niche it was. You know, I was watching, as I told you, Mark, I was watching TV, and the Ford advert used a trail runner to show what was aspirational. With money, here's what I think happens. It's the breakout college stars. It's the breakout African runners. Let's think about this. Let's say you're a 2:07 marathoner in Kenya. You're not even top 50. 2:07 is not doing it anymore. You're not making money running a 2:0. Maybe if you are American or from the UK, you're top. But let's say you're in Africa and you're running 2:07. You'll make a little bit. I would say these runners never came to trail before because there was no money. But there is. And if you recently saw one of the great records ever, the Pikes Peak Marathon, the ascent had a record from 1990 by Matt Carpenter. It wasn't broken. It was just broken the other day by a French guy. But the two behind, two African runners. So I would say on the female side, we're going to see, and I can't remember her name right now. I'll figure it in a minute. There's breakout college stars. There are college stars coming in the US and Africa who are just off professional in track, half marathon, full marathon. And these names, it's not the Courtney, because we know Courtney, right? It is, the people, Katie Scheid, who we know today. Obviously, the Asian runners, maybe you can cover more of that. But my prediction is an unknown college track star from America or African female runner who makes the jump over in their 20s and dominates.
And you think that's especially because of the new sponsorship, the money coming in, so they do see the potential to make a living or at least have some income through that.
Absolutely. There's been nobody did ultra for a living, right? Like it wasn't, sure, I think Killian's reinvented, but he has real soul and he's making real money. But nobody, Jim Walmsley, Zach, but like we live in Asia. Do you think there is any Asian female athlete making a proper living today in trail?
I know for a fact they don't. They're trying, but they don't.
So the question is I predict that either an Asian female star or an unknown female star comes across and starts to make real money. And they come for the money rather than for the soul. Whether that's a good thing, we'll find out. But that's my prediction for 2024, particularly on the female side.
I mean, on the Asian side, I can only highlight two females, which we're both kind of close to. It's Hao Ha from Vietnam, which has come close fourth at the UTMB CCC. There's a famous video of her overtaking Emily Forsberg to number one. I remember that some of the UTMB commentators were surprised to say, "Who is this girl?" Like we don't even how to pronounce her name. So Hao Ha is someone to watch for sure. She's a mountain goat from north of Vietnam, and then of course Somaya Buddha from Nepal, based in Hong Kong, who's also I think pushing it. Has been a bit injured earlier last year, but I think we have hope for her to really also become top three in the world.
And we must shout out Ryan Blair for what he did, because when he gave the ability to Sunmaya to really show her potential, he couldn't get a sponsor, so he put his hands in his own pocket and he put the money on the table. And let's face it, at CCC last year, or maybe 2 years ago, in 2022, Sunmaya, if that race had been 5K longer, she would have won. She would have won. Yeah. She was closing down on Natalie Blondine, who won. I think you're right. I think when an Asian, particularly on the female side, wins a big race.
Yeah, I mean, Somaya just signed a sponsorship with the Chinese brand Kailas yesterday. So in terms of money, it's
wow.
So FYI, we don't endorse any brands we mention here. So it's not like we have any contracts signed. It's all just talk. Yeah. All right, moving on to the males. What's going on the male side? Do you think something similar is happening with some track stars or other stars coming into trail, or do you have other views on the male athletes?
I have one in particular where I think he's coming back. He's got Adam Peterman from the US, unbeaten. He won Western States 2 years ago, got injured, unbeaten over 100. He came from college. It's the same theme. He came from college. So in America, he's pretty well known. Of course, the American with Jim and Zach going 1-2 at UTMB finally kind of broke into the European scene. Clearly, the European scene is super strong. But I think Adam Peterman comes back from injury and starts to dominate. On the Asian side, so, here's my prediction. Crazy. And you know me, I'm such a passionate fan of Laz. I think Tomo finishes Barkley. That's my prediction for 2024. Tomokazu, who is the great Japanese race director and great runner, he's passionate. We have never had anyone from Asia finish Barkley. And my prediction is he finishes Barkley this year. What a crazy, amazing thing that would be.
It's, I think would be just nationality-wise quite fascinating to have more of the Asian runners, of course, make these big races. I hear you. I think I would agree. I don't have a name in mind, to be honest, but I do think the Asian females are stronger globally, but I also think that there is a lot of grit in the Asian males, and I do think they will also come out in certain races. Now, I mean, the Chinese also very strong at UTMB, so I think my prediction is that some Chinese will win CCC this year. I think that's kind of where I'm curious.
So just some thought here. So I think maybe the theme in our podcast is, because I suppose I've been in ultra a little bit longer. Here's a question. I don't know if we can answer it. For the longest time, American women did really well overseas. So American woman won UTMB years ago. A lady called Rory Bozio became 7th overall 12 years ago. Courtney won it. It was been won many times. American men took forever to get there overseas. And again, we're seeing the Asian woman dominate, not the Asian men. I don't know if there's any rationale for this, but certainly ultra shows us that women seem to travel and race better. I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if you have any thoughts, but it's clear that Asian women are dominating more on the global ultra scene than Asian men.
I have only a snarky little comment to make. That is, trail running is one of the most inclusive sports on the planet because women are as equal as men. And it's amazing how, whether 100 miler, male and female, actually equally strong. So if you talk about inclusivity these days, which is an important topic in some nations, I think trail running is very inclusive and very equal.
Honestly, Marcus, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. I mean, we know Courtney wins races. Maggie Gutterall wins races. Women, the further we go, these 200-mile races, women are regularly top 3, top 2, top 1. They're winning. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's just this reality that it is one of the most equal sports. Sure, there is a men's winner and a women's winner, but the further we go, the clearer it is.
Yeah, I would love to have some data as well on sponsorships there at some point to see if brands pay women and men equal. I mean, I can imagine that a Courtney makes as much as a male competitor.
We can't go this whole episode without saying what Courtney is doing to sport. Yeah. What a great question. Does Courtney make as much? What? Maybe not as Killian. That might not be a fair comparison because Killian has transcended. But are the top women, and Courtney, I think, would raise the bar for everybody. So do the people right next door, Katie Scheid, Natalie Blondin, the other ladies who are doing it, and what is the step down? You just mentioned that St. Maya got sponsorship, but we don't know, but we're going to assume it's lower, but at least it's rising. So the rising tide. Great question. Maybe a good prediction that the sponsorships will be equal.
Yes, that's correct. Let's find out throughout this year. Next prediction for this year, I have talking about UTMB, and there's always a big thing about which nationality wins UTMB. We all know people carry the flags into the finish line. Which nationality do you think will win the 100-mile this year at UTMB? What's your prediction? Which nationality?
Well, I don't think Jim's doing it. I know Zach's not doing it. So I think the American men will suffer. I think Francois Dane comes back, and I think France reclaims it. That would be my prediction. I think Francois, I follow him on Strava. He's doing all the right things he's doing. He's been injured. I think Francois comes back and shows that maybe he is the greatest at 100 miles. Killian's the greatest mountain athlete, but over 100 miles, I think Francois wins. And you?
Yeah, I would also predict a French. I think also a French will will come back. I think they want to show the Americans what they got.
100%.
And not just good wine they have. So what's your prediction on how many loops will happen this year at the backyard?
Oh my God, and you told us we only had an hour for this podcast. I could talk about this for the rest of my life. Harvey did something. I'm going to assume that everyone who listens to this knows what backyard is. And I'm going to assume most of you know that Harvey did 107 loops in one of the greatest races of all time. And whether you watched it or not, I hope you watched a little bit. Backyard has an ability to capture imagination because you can pop in every hour. And it started on Sunday and it finished on Thursday. Harvey said he could have gone on through the night. So through the day, They finished at sunrise, 107 loops, right? Harvey looked good. I think Harvey can get into the fifth, finish the 4.5 fifth day, start to get into the 6th day. I think we're going over 120 because I think once they get into the 110s, 12s, the lure of entering the 6th day, 5 complete days. So 5 times 24 is 120. And remember, Biggs is a very hard course. The night loop is hilly, 384 feet of elevation gain on each loop, whereas the road is a little flatter. I think we're going into the 6th day. Here's the real question, Marcus. Can we go a week?
It's possible. I don't think this year, though. I predict sub 100 loops. I think we're going to have, I pick a number, 96. I think that's a good number.
You mean just the Biggs or best overall for the whole year?
Best overall this year. Yeah. That's a max.
Sam Harvey, Phil Gore, Harvey. There's so many. John Knoll, Maggie Corney. You know what? I would love to see St. Meyer have a go. Like, are we going to get these athletes? I respect your view, but I'm willing to bet $1 that it's going over 100.
Okay, fair enough. Switching quickly to my home country, I wanted to hear your prediction for the Berlin Marathon winning time. This is also
Kelvin Kiptum 1:59 and change, I think. Now, have you watched him covering the last 10K of a marathon? Have you watched him?
I have not, no.
For all you people out there, watch it. His stride, he looks unhindered by muscle fatigue. It's astonishing. I don't think Elliot gets there. I think Elliot, who is the GOAT, I think Kelvin Kiptum puts down at 1:59 and change. What do you think?
I think it's still just scratching above 2. So I'm, again, picking a number 2 hours, like 45 seconds along those lines. It's going to get close, but I still don't think we're going to break 2 hours this year.
It's fair.
It's tight. It's tight. And last but not least, what's your view on the Asian FKTs for this year? What are your predictions there? Are there any big FKTs happening?
Here's the really interesting question, and maybe it's a cultural thing. So again, we're going to assume everyone knows what an FKT is, fastest known time. There's a fantastic website, you can see it. There's FKTs across America, the long trails, the Pacific Crest Trail, the Continental Divide, the Appalachian Trail. There's, right now, for example, there's the Spine Race, which is up the spine of the UK, the Pennine Way. There's FKTs, I think we all know the Bob Graham round and the 3 great rounds in the UK. I'm sure maybe in Germany and Europe. We just don't seem to have FKTs in Asia. Like, do people do them in Vietnam or in Thailand? Like, there is a few cross Singapore or... My prediction is we start to actually see FKTs as a real thing in Asia, because as of today, it's barely a thing. But we have some amazing trails in Hong Kong and Vietnam, and Thailand and Malaysia. I mean, Singapore barely, and obviously in Japan. My prediction is that FKTs actually come alive and people start to do them, and because, why do an FKT? There's no money. It's just for yourself. But I think it's a cool thing. Do you see any FKTs in Vietnam?
Well, I can claim I registered the first FKT on the website in Vietnam.
What?
That was my thing 4 years ago. There is one great route from Dalat, the highlands, down to a city called Nha Trang. And it's a beautiful, kind of fairly actually steep route down. So it drops 1,000 meters in elevation, 120 kilometers. I registered it. It's quite iconic. So you usually take a bike or you take a car or something, but you can go down from the highlands down to the coast. Beautiful. And it's kind of a serpentine road down. I have not done it yet, but it's registered, and I don't think anyone has yet tried it. But at the time, 4 years ago, I was registered the first one. So I need to double check. I'm very curious now. I don't think many more have been added to the FKT website. I do know that the Southeast Asians, at least, are doing a lot of ultra distance stuff, but it's usually just with on loop, right? So it's this very systematic approach of let's just get this one loop down in my backyard. Basically, it's not a backyard, but it's still like, hey, I know this one street. Let me just circle it 1,000 times. Yeah. I mean, during COVID, we had these crazy stories where someone just went up and down the staircase a lot, and I think it seems to be people are very good here at just switching off the mind and doing one thing. But FKTs, yeah, I think you're right. We're going to see them more. I think it has also to do with that people have done, like the good athletes have done many races. I think there may be a bit of a race fatigue. You would have to travel really far out, like to America or to Europe. Visa-wise, not easy. Flight-wise, not easy. So people looking for something new. And yeah, FKT could be a good alternative for someone to try it out. But I do think that the culture in Asia is more about your group being together, going to race together. It's more of a herd thinking. So an FKT is a bit more of an individualistic thing to do it. And I just what I see here is not necessarily a thing to do things by yourself so much. It's really about training partners, race partners. So, but yeah, let's see. I'm curious to see which big FKT in Asia will be cracked this year.
Let's see if we can both find one and go and do one. Put our names up there.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. Yeah. Well. So where the world is talking about, or Ray Dalio talking about a changing world order, we're not going to go into this at all here, but we have maybe a change in the trail world order happening, and we see how certain races are dominating. We of course know what happened with UTMB the last few years, where they partnered / being acquired by the Ironman group. That has changed the image and the organization and the whole system of UTMB, really, to get your stones, travel to races, become an Ironman-like organization. I hope most of us have heard about the Whistler scandal, confusion, misunderstanding, depends who you ask, I guess. And that has also changed the perspective on UTMB, especially in North America. So what's happening, Ned? And what do you think is the rhythm for the trail world this year that we're going to see?
Growing pains, Remember when you were a teenager and you had angst, right? And didn't quite know what to do. Trails, even though maybe not on this show, but we'll do history one day because, trail's been around a long time. But I think right now we are facing this. It's money's great. Everyone needs money. But when money comes into a sport that didn't have it, and particularly, Ironman, I spent 10 years in Ironman. And when Ironman got taken over by private equity, we all grumbled as well, right? Prices doubled. Races became more about just, in the sausage machine. Get athletes in, get them out, the one and dones, right? It was quite famous. Do one, get an Ironman tattoo, and you didn't know who, Mark Allen or Dave Scott or Chris McCormack or the greats were, or Natasha Badman. And that Ironman, it's lost a lot of love. And so when Ironman came to Ultra, there was already this kind of uneasy feeling in your tummy, and it didn't take much. Probably the whole Gary Robbins Whistler thing, it's blown out of proportion because people already give the benefit of the doubt away from Ironman. I'm sure they're good people. They go home and they, just doing their best. Unfortunately, there's money in trail now, and Ironman has not shown to have the best reputation when it comes to athlete care or money care. Money. Athletes. Hey, look, but we all got to run a business, right? So I do think, here's the interesting thing. Will pro athletes not go to UTMB? I think it's hard, man. Like, you got to make a living, right? That's what they said. Jim Walmsley put on his Strava when the whole Gary thing went down. He put on his Strava, so what to race next year? ? Now, that's Jim. I mean, he won it. I think it's growing pains. I think trail just does become Ironman. I think there's enough people who are just getting into trail. I think it becomes Ironman, and I think it becomes a money sport, and that's kind of sad, but I don't think we can stop it.
Do you think that's going to bring out new dynamics in this world? Like, are there alternatives popping up? Is this a call back to the roots? I mean, because I believe everything that goes to one extreme also brings out another extreme. It has to be some kind of balance, the yin and yang of trail running. So the UTMB takes it to the more commercial extreme. What do we see on the other side happen?
Lazarus Lake. Again, look, I'm 3 years ago, Laz on April the 1st put out a note that he'd been brought by Ironman. And it was again, Laz, I don't know if all of you who read Laz, but he's a poet. He writes beautifully. And he wrote this really beautiful post about, everything has to come to money in the end, and he's not immune to it. So he sold Backyard and Barkley to Ironman, and he wishes them well. And people were like, what? No. Of course, it was April 1st. The soul of there's always these little races that won't get brought out, right? So by UTMB, not everybody, right? Not everybody. I think, Laz is never selling Barkley, right? Barkley will always be weird, right? And there's enough weird races. So I think the dynamics, but I think, you know what the biggest thing changes? So when I was 20, no one did marathons. If you did a marathon, you were amazing. Today, everyone does a marathon. Now it's, can you do an ultra? Very few people do ultra. I think what changes is everyone's going to do an ultra. Ultra is the new marathon. Ultra is the new marathon. That's the dynamic change. The one and done. Oh, I did a 50K. I'm an ultra runner. Let's go. And nothing wrong with that. Hey, if you said we won't touch on world dynamics, if everybody was an ultra runner, the world would be a better place.
And why is that, Ned?
Because ultra runners overwhelmingly are good people. Why? Because here's the thing, my little rant for the day. Stop people, if you're listening to this podcast, when you do an ultra race and people say, oh, I don't know why I do it. You do know. You're so lucky that your life is so lovely that you can go out and suffer for your own enjoyment when most of the world is really suffering. Think how lucky you are that this is what you can do. And if the whole world could feel that suffering, and if you're listening, I use a little inverted commas, it's amazing. And I think it teaches you a lot of lessons. I think the world would be calmer, less angry if we all went out and ran ultras.
I do think it crashes the ego quite a bit. And I mean, both of us have lived in Singapore. We've been in finance, fintech for a bit. And it's always, you go into a conference or whatnot, and then you meet someone who has a big ego. And then most of the time, they do Ironman. And you meet someone like you who is just at peace and quite friendly. Yes, you do it in ultra running. It's like you can really slap on the labels. I mean, labels are useful and also not useful at the same time. But as someone who has done 50 or even 100K, they have learned all about life and about themselves. That's for sure. Yeah.
You know the phrase, if you want to win a race, run 100 meters. If you want to find out who you are, run 100 miles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I moved from Singapore to Vietnam, I was on that mission. Let's kind of put work aside. Let's get out there. 100K is really what you need to do to dig deep. And we all know those terms, digging your pain cave, so on. But you come out as a new person. And I think where some people go to Burning Man, I say go to 100K and you have an equal experience after 100K than after Burning Man. Right? So yeah, it's a simple, but no drugs involved. That's great. I mean, the drugs is endorphins and cortisol and other things. I think that's naturally induced. It's amazing.
In America, there are Burning Man type ultra events where people are running 100Ks, may or may not be taking some substances, but they're running hundreds of Ks, hundreds of miles in the desert. All of this stuff. I think there is some crossover. So I used to surf and skate, and I think the subculture, I think trail fits into the subculture. And I think ever since lockdown, subculture is important, finding yourself, having your own time. I think that's where trail comes from, and it comes into the Red Bull, skate, surf, snowboard, a little bit of rebel type thing. And that's the one thing I really hope. Marathon has become super mainstream. I just really hope that trail doesn't become so mainstream. Like, it still needs to be grungy and skatey and weird a little bit. If it, while I'm so amazed that Ford cars use a trail runner to advertise, I think that's great that we're getting that exposure. I also don't want it to be like, don't pick on me for tennis. Like, really, like tennis, to advertise things? Like what happens if we get, trail runners making $10 million? And
Come on, Ned, don't sound like an old fart here.
I know.
Let the world pass. Let it happen.
This is the balance. This is why there's two of us. I could be the old, old grumpy man in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's exciting. I think it's just natural evolution. I think it's what happens. It's good to have camps. It's good to have discourse. It's good to have a conversation about it. I think it just makes it all bigger and more exciting. And maybe in 5 years' time, we sit here talking about a different sport because the commercialization of trail running has brought up a new trend, like something new. It's something, I don't know, we don't even know yet.
We are right now. And again, I come back to that singular moment when Courtney was mobbed at UTMB. I mean, that.
And just to clarify, mobbed was more in a positive way. She was just carried up the mountain by the masses.
For all of you who have seen the Tour de France, the Tour de France is the most watched live sports event in the world if you take the total crowd over the 3 weeks. And the UTMB used to have a couple of people on the trails. That one moment when, I don't know, thousands of people created that tunnel for Courtney to go through. I mean, it was wild. That was the changing moment in our sport.
I mean, we talked at that weekend and we were chatting the entire time. It was just, I was at dinner with my girlfriend at the time and now my partner. And I could not focus on dinner because I had to watch the live stream. I was like, I need to do this right now. Well, talking about races, let's go to our race recap corner and have a bit of a check-in what's going on in the last few days or even right now in the race world. So we have as you mentioned already earlier, the Spine race going on. So what's happening there, Ned? What's going on in the Spine race?
So the Spine race is going on as we speak. For the listeners, the Spine is called because it's like the backbone of the English mountains. It's 400k-ish, 350, 400k through the Pennines and the Lake District in the UK. It's become quite infamous because they do it in winter. It is non-stop. It's not a stage race. It is self-navigated, carry your own stuff. And right now, so it is 9:44 a.m. in Singapore, which means it is 2:44 a.m. I checked the weather, where the leaders are. It's -9 centigrade and snowing hard.
Wow.
It is tough stuff. So John Kelly has pulled out. Unfortunately, the great John Kelly has pulled out. Pavel Polonsky, who is a multi-time great, is pulled out. In the lead is the tea snatcher, Damien Hall. For any of you who follow Damien Hall, he's known as the tea snatcher because he takes your tea, because he likes cups of tea. He's pretty great. He finished 4 loops at Barkley. But the Spine, I would say, everybody claims, we're the toughest race, right? The toughest race on earth. Oh my God. I think I might vomit if one more race says they're the toughest race on earth. This is my old grumpy man in the corner. This one, the Spine it's certainly not, but it gets close. So right now we have maybe about 2 more days to go, battling the snow, the high winds through the hills of the UK. Yeah, Damien Hall, group of 3 leading, and the greatest backyarder in Europe is leading the females. Claire Barnois from France, who was the final remaining female at Big's Backyard, is now the leading female, I think, in about 8th overall, currently in the Spine.
Exciting. So I'm sure we're going to cover the final finisher list next week. We also had the Herd 100 happening in Hawaii. Have you done this race?
I have not. It's a 5-loop, 20-mile, super technical race, jungle routes. And I think for our listeners in Asia, if you're used to Vietnam mountain marathons or Philippine jungle races, Indonesian, jungle races, go to Hurt. It's apparently a lot of people find it very technical because it's in the jungle, and we're used to the jungle, and it's hot. We're used to the heat. So I actually think maybe one of the top Asian runners maybe should go to Hurt because it's quite well, and it stands for Hawaii Ultra Running Trail Race or something, HURT, 5 loops. And the winner was Ihor Veres on the male side. Ihor, for, again, I try not to bring everything back to backyard, but maybe it's just what I think. He was the assist to Harvey Lewis. So he won that, a very humble young man. And here's the amazing thing. The average age of most winners in Ultra 20 years ago was 40 and above.
And big shout out to the second, actually, Anthony Lee, a good friend of mine from Boulder, who came second, and he crushed his PR by 5 hours.
What?
So that's quite something. Yeah, Anthony Lee, some Asian American runner to follow in Boulder. And again, the third, guess what? It has been a Japanese, Michito Sawa. So that's also back to our, I guess, predictions for this year of the Japanese runners, which
well, also in that, and while that is great, I'm glad it's your friend that came second. And it also in that is that Candice Burt was there.
Correct.
Candice, and I'm just checking the result. I don't think she won the females. I think a lady called Andreas Taras, right?
Correct. So Candice came third. Yeah, she also from Boulder. Yeah, in 29 hours and 40 minutes.
And what Candice has done is taken out. So what you asked, we had this question, what happens to trail running? It gets commercialized. More and more people do it. But Candice has created this 200 miles is a new 100 miles, right? Her races sell out now. Her 3 races, Bigfoot, Tahoe, can't remember the last one, Moab. She's selling out 200-mile races, 320K people. Like this is, so I think trail, to your question, I think we start to get oversaturated in the 50K, 50 miles, 100K, maybe 100 miles. So what do? Just go to 200 miles, right? Like, and Candice, who also famously ran 50K a day for 200 days straight.
Yeah, I think that's just, we're going to see more of those extreme feats of endurance performance. Incredible. I hear you. Yeah. Going to the road, we had a new world record being shattered by Agnes Jebet-Nektic. In Valencia, she ran a 10-kilometer road in 28 minutes and 46 seconds.
Wow.
I mean, that'd be right now my maybe 7K time.
Well, you're doing pretty good for 7K.
Yeah. But that's incredible. I think we see more on the road. We see a lot of new records. It's not yet in Berlin, of course, you mentioned earlier, but the 10K, the male and female, the half marathons, people are crushing it.
Do we feel, so I don't know how deep we want to get on this, in Ironman for a while, people were allowed these new skin suits, swimsuits, right? Which changed the friction of the water on your body, and people were swimming way quicker. Now, we all know that the Nike Zoom, whatever they're called, shoes, 4% quicker. 4% is massive. Now, swimsuits were banned in the end. Now, I don't think it's the same on the trails, right? Because if you're running Hurt 100 with all the routes and the trails, what's your thoughts on how equipment is changing? Because clearly shoes are making road running faster.
I think it's a no-brainer, and it's strongly correlated. I saw some numbers, but I can't remember it. I need to figure it out again, maybe for next show. It's how you can really see the step up or the speed has changed since those shoes have been introduced by Nike, Hoka, Adidas, who all are having these more thicker carbon plate shoes. And it has made a massive difference in road running. So it's a bit like in Ironman, I believe you have a different suit, you have a better bike, you can make a difference in time. Road running now has evolved to new shoe development, which gives it another speed. The question is, trail running, what's there to do to make you faster? You can argue not much. That's also what I love about it, because whether you have better shoes or better poles or backpack, nutrition, otherwise you just got to do it.
I think listeners, tell us. Don't know, you'll find a way to connect with us. What is it? So I do, road running, the shoes. I was an Ironman. There was all this discussion about drafting and better bikes and, for the longest time, which bars you were allowed and all this type of stuff. And road running, clearly, the shoes are faster, right? Springs in your shoes. It's a good question. I can't think of anything in trail running. Clearly, and look, completely different subject, drugs in trail running, performance enhancing, EPO, steroids, all that crap, right? So just assume people aren't doing that because there's not enough money. Of course, when money comes, people will do that. But equipment-wise, maybe I have an idea. This is not a good idea, so don't anybody do this. I wonder if springy poles. I wonder if poles that had little boosters in them. People could boost with their poles, but I think you would find that out pretty quickly. I think you're right. Trail running feels pretty pure. There's not much you could do apart from train more.
I do think that in the trail running, it's more about the things happening in training. So if you can be based in a place that is, of course, full of mountains, you're going to be better in the race. If you have a good coach that helps you with recovery, if you have technology that helps you with recovery, I mean, I think we see a lot of new devices and gear and equipment that helping, especially with recovery. I think that's where if you recover faster, then you are better in training, and then hence you're most likely better at racing. So I think that's a new world in training happening in trail running that will help you to race better. We see faster times there. I mean, there's no surprise that the Worms of the world crushing all these course records because there's a team, it's equipment, it's a proper program around now, where maybe 10, 15 years ago, you just live in a mountain, you happen to live in a mountain, so you go trail running, and that's how UTMB started, right? You just run around the mountain and that's it. Like training doesn't really matter, blah, blah, blah. It's really now, it's like more money comes in, more team support is there, more equipment is there. I think that's gonna make a big difference in trail running. My friend Valentine Orange was going to race this weekend, the Vietnam Trail Marathon here, 70K up in North Vietnam. He spent days and days hiking Himalayas, he said himself, this was the best training he ever has done, because he had time to go with Sange Sherpa, another very big trail runner, to the mountains. And if you live in a city and you don't really care about that, you would not have this training. But now it's possible to do, and you can hike in 8 days and you have the best training. So I think those things will make a big difference in the years to come. I
think it's so true. Like, and Valentine Orange is one of the best amateur runners here, and he's doing what he can. When you're listening to what's happening at UTMB, North Face has a chalet in Chamonix, and athletes can just go and hang out. That's such a massive leap above, right? Sure, we're not up at basketball or soccer yet where there's but they just go to the chalet, can live in Chamonix to do their thing, right? Like incredible access and ability that people have to do things. So yeah, maybe not equipment, but just the professionalism and money in the sport give people's time. I mean, and if we look at Asia, look at St. Maya, right? Clearly has all the ability, and now she's been enabled via the Asia North Face team to harness that potential. I think what we're saying is a bit like Valentine Orange has just done. He's harnessing his potential.
100%. Do you see also trail running becoming more of a national sport in terms of the national sport federations starting to have a trail running team, putting funding in, maybe even doing talent support in the young ages, building up, like academies? What's happening there?
Wow, that's a question. Holy crap, man. It's only...
I didn't give it the question.
No, it's good. It's good.
Surprise.
It's good. It's only at UTMB that people run with flags that I've noticed. Now, maybe there's other races I don't know, but you don't see it at Western States. You don't see it at Leadville. You don't see it at UTMF. From what I can tell, you don't see it much. It's never been a nationalistic thing, right? Because it's very individual, right? You trail run for yourself, and there's no team because there's no money, right? But it's a good question. Does it happen? I don't think it gets on the radar of countries' funding. Not for a while.
Not for a while, I agree. I do think that carrying your flag is going to get more and more important. I think that happens in Asian races much more frequently. You have the Vietnam Mountain Marathon, which has 160 flags prepared before the finish line, so you can grab your flag and run with it into the finish line. That is already a thing. I know that many other races do the same. I know that Philippines has now a national trail running team. It's not yet fully supported by the government, but they started to put together a team of, I think it's 5 or 6 trail runners who they say we're going to support you. And if money is in the game, then governments will also follow. I can see how it become maybe more of a national sport in Asia than maybe it's more of a grassroots sport in America, where you're right, it's just really about who you are and what you do out there by yourself. And that's also, I think, a new development where maybe the Asian governments realize, oh, interesting, how can we put our athletes out there as a new sport and build a program?
You know what, Marcus? Your surprise questions started something. Maybe we should, because I think the American government, sports funding agency, and I know nothing about this, but I'm just going to say it because I often say stuff about things I know nothing about. But do I think the American government's going to start funding trail runners? No. But it's a really good point. Maybe that's the Asian opportunity. Like if there's a Philippines, like you said, I know you've been following it closely. maybe we can get somebody from the Sports Council in the Philippines to talk about this. Is that our opportunity, that the government start to sponsor? Because you're right. I think I did see some footage from the Vietnam Mountain Marathon last year. People were carrying flags. Maybe that's it. And you're right. When I look at people from Asia going to races, there is quite a nationalistic thing, right? Now, completely different topic. I don't like nationalism. I think we're all humans and we should all love each other as humans. I don't care where you're from. But in ultra, it seems to be done with love, not with other stuff. And so maybe do you think maybe that's the Asian way, that for trail running, that there may well be government support here?
At least I would encourage it. We all know that Sport SG, Sport Singapore, has put a lot of funding into building up this huge sport hub in Singapore. And if Singapore decides something, we know it comes big times. I can see that other governments might follow. And it will matter of time. I'm hopeful there, and I think that could happen, where maybe the funding doesn't come in yet from corporates so much, starting here and there. But if governments see an opportunity for marketing or exposure to the world as a, let's say, Vietnam or Singapore or Philippine trail running team, why not?
Vietnam, how hard? She came, fourth?
Fourth by literally a few minutes or seconds.
So she's top in the world. And again, Vietnam's an amazing country. But how many sports is Vietnam vying for top spot in the world? Not many, right? Not many sports, right? And Sunmaya Buddha from Nepal. How many sports is Nepal at the top? And of course, I'm going to throw a little hat in the ring. Here's me not being nationalistic, but, Joshua To from Singapore did 72 laps and came 20th in the world in backyard. Like Singapore's, maybe we punch above our weight. It's smaller numbers, but this is it. Maybe we should talk about this more, think about this more, encourage it. Here's the great phrase, Marcus: never doubt that a small group of determined people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has, right?
And throwing in something else here as well, which is, we haven't really talked about at this stage, but it's a whole live streaming, live viewing. And that is a huge commercial opportunity. We all know that, at least you and I see it here in our parts of the world, how much phones and live streams are used in Asia. I followed UTMB closely. You and I did closely. The amount of Asians streaming in and commenting was incredible. So again, follow the money where live streaming is a commercial opportunity. And if that's going to just increase where people are watching, and we also know Asia Trail Masters is another event series here in Asia who's live streaming. I saw the numbers. They're really increasing and growing a lot last year. Again, opportunities for corporates and governments to get in, because live streaming is just the media platforms which bring in more viewership, bring in more money, bring in more attention.
For any of you who are new to trail running and think what the live streaming that you see at UTMB now is normal, it's not. It's incredible. It's amazing. Watching Zach and Jim come down the hill at the end, the people running after them. I don't know if you watch. There's live stream of 200-mile races, 5-day live streams. They're doing 5-day live streams. Of course, we all know that our phones have changed the world and everything. It's so true, right? And you're right. There's no bigger consumers of live stream than Asia, right? This is where it is. We will consume.
It's fascinating.
More than anybody else. So it's a good point. I think we're at this point, which is going to be incredible. Yeah. But a lot of races. It is great to see.
Yeah. That's even why you and I spent time recording a podcast, because we're so curious and so intrigued by all this inflection point. So, dear audience, now we have a little golden nugget for you. This is called Ned's Weekly Drop, where our dear friend Ned, who's running a lot, is writing down all his running thoughts. And we will have him read out his weekly drop to us. So Ned, why don't you kick it off and wrap up this wonderful first episode with your weekly drop.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate it. I'm going to do that. I will just give 30 seconds of context. I don't love writing, but when I've done a lot of races, and I used to write after races, and I found a style of writing. For everybody who find my sentences too short. I write in a fairly, what in music is called staccato, which means just little piece by little piece. It's more because it's a stream of consciousness that comes to me as I run, and then I write it down. So these are not race reports, although I have done a whole bunch of those. These are just general thoughts. I'm going to start with the first one I wrote, The Way of the Why, which was the first one I sent. So forgive, because I am going to read it, so I won't be staring directly at the camera, but it's 5 minutes, I would say. So here we go. All right. It's called The Way of the Why. I hope you enjoy, people. You know when people say never again, or I don't know why I do this during a race? They do know. We all know. You know, right? We don't have to do it. No one makes us. So why do we do it? Because we are lucky enough to have the resources and the time to willingly suffer. Because nature is us, and endurance in nature makes us more us. Because it's an art form, not just on Strava. Because suffering is soul enhancing, because it makes us superhuman, because it's beautiful. I heard someone called endurance sports only for people who are weird. He didn't mean what you think. He meant this: Western, educated, industrial, rich democracies. Only people who are extremely fortunate in life have the luxury to be able to partake in what is essentially a survival activity turned into a game. It's what Courtney always says. This is a game. Let's play. And the game is spreading. Economically, more and more people have the economic freedom to enable them to indulge in willing suffering via endurance. And that's a good thing, because when life gets too comfortable, we don't grow. We're in a time where so many more people want to experience this lifestyle. There has never, ever been a time like this. Well, maybe that's not true. The biggest spectator sport in 1880 in New York was pedestrianism. At Madison Square Gardens, athletes would take part in 6-day races, 6 days of non-stop walking loops of the famous sports arena. Crowds of 20,000 people would watch and gamble on the outcome. The athletes were superstars. And then it died, only to come back again now. Courtney, Killian, Sorokin, modern-day pedestrians scaling the heights so we can all dream and suffer and indulge in this life-giving activity. Long may this current wave continue, because as a planet, we'll all get better when we all experience this great joy. So when you are asked why you do this, say, because I'm lucky, because you really are, to be able to do this at this time right now. See you out there. Ned.
Thank you, Ned. And I'm lucky to have recorded this first episode with you. Thank you so much.
All good. So fun. I could talk about this all day.
I just realized that's true. We call it One More K because we believe that it's a very important mental approach to a race, or training. One more K. There is a finish line. Just keep it up. Well, it's been a pleasure for the first one. So if you guys like it, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, One More K. We are going to release this podcast on all available platforms. And also, if the video is good enough for this one, we're going to be on YouTube. In any case, we have a newsletter we can subscribe to. You can read Ned's weekly drop there. You can subscribe on our website, onemorek.com. And of course, you can listen to the episode also on the website. Any feedback, any ideas, it's always welcome. Again, this is the first step on a very long mountain race, endurance race. But it's been fun. Thank you, Ned.
It's been so fun. Thank you, man.
Thank you. See you next week.